First of all, you saying clearly a travel means that you would actually know something. So if you don't have rules to support what you're saying, then, and if you've never seen this move before, what is backing you?
All right, so that is Milton Chavis, famous at this point, viral. I wouldn't quite say famous, but viral Instagram basketball player and trainer. And I'm not trying to say he's not famous to take away from him. I'm just saying that those are two different things for sure. He's definitely viral. As you can see, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. If you've ever seen the guy that does crazy stuff online, jumps, skips, and whatever, and says it's legal, this is him. I've always felt he has an argument to be made as to what he's saying and why the moves are legal by the letter of the law. Obviously, a lot of that stuff would get called a travel, but I see the argument he's making. First, I want to say he's clearly a basketball player. He knows a thing or two. He had as you can see here, he is posting game tape, which is always a good sign. It's not clips. It's a full game, full footage of a 30-point double-double with 5 assists. Clearly a hooper. Clearly can play ball. Clearly an athlete. Now look, I don't know how good he is. I don't know what level that was at that he was playing at, but I'm doing a breakdown here, and this is not going to be, again, I'm not a content creator, guys. I'm just an average individual. I'm a basketball coach, so that's the way I'm operating. This isn't going to be the cleanest, most well-edited content. This is going to be hopefully valuable footage for some people. So, he's MDW. All right, I want to get into the footage of what he does and what I believe, if it is a travel or not. So, I'm going to give you his argument, and I'll give you my take at the end. I do believe he travels. I do believe that he has an argument because the interpretation is kind of unclear. So let's do this, okay? Here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna find some clips here.
Y'all need to leave.
I'm basically blind reacting, okay? So I'm gonna find some clips here.
Just
and we're gonna go through these clips, and I'm gonna blind react to why I believe they're a travel or not, okay? So let's start with this one. So unfortunately with Reels, you cannot backtrack. So here's the thing with this, right? What he's doing is he's manipulating the gather. He's establishing his gather, and this is kind of consistent across all of his clips and what he does in his moves. He's going to manipulate the gather to the point where, he's taking a few steps prior to the gather. And, what is the gather, right? It's kind of an esoteric concept within basketball. A lot of people don't really know what that means. I'll define it for you. A gather, this is actually something I found out pretty recently. A gather is frequently interpreted by the refs as the point at which you could no longer dribble again. So, at this point, clearly, he would no longer be able to dribble again. Okay, so this is his gather step. Okay, at that point, he's gathered the ball. That first foot was on the ground. That would be his step. He then takes 2 more steps. I actually think this is not a travel, right? That one, I don't believe is a travel. There are some that will be, but let me explain why I think certain ones are travels, just mechanically, and some are not. At this point, he's in motion, right? That's his gather right there. He's going to take 1, 2, and let it go. That's not a travel, okay? I don't believe that's a travel, and I think that he has a point there. Now, with the gather, right, a lot of people will look at the gather and think that you can just do whatever you want right before you pick the ball up, and after that, you can then take 2 steps. And to some extent, that's true, but it's all about what gets called the gather, right, and where you're at. At some point, the ref is going to call that a pivot as opposed to a gather. And a lot of the times, I feel like with MDW, with Milton Chavis here, he manipulates that for the clip, and I think he really believes in what he's saying. I don't think he's trying to scam or anything like that, but I do believe that he's incorrect. That step right there, that was fine. Okay, I'll give you an example and show you what I'm talking about as to why this is frequently a travel. It is a travel. Okay, that's not a travel. Again, I wouldn't call that a travel based on the current rules and the way you get one gather, 2 more steps, and you're able to pivot and step through. So combining all those together and stacking them up, it looks terrible. And he's like shocking people, like, wow, this is not a travel. How's that not a travel? And I'll explain that on the clips when it comes up. So look, he's gonna call that the gather, right? Jump stop off of the gather, 1 step through. You can pick your foot up again. So that back foot comes up. So what he's doing here, right, is right. Look, that's the gather. All right. Boom. Establishes a pivot. Takes 1 step, and you're allowed to pick up that back foot, that pivot foot, when you're going to shoot or pass. You can't do it to dribble again. If you obviously if you caught it and you're pivoting, you can't pick up that foot and then dribble. That is a violation. So, I believe I'm saying that correctly, yeah. But essentially, I mean, that's what he's doing. Those are the elements, right? It's the gather, the pivot, multiple times in some instances, and then the step through. When you put that all together in different variations, different formats, that's when you get that crazy look, like, oh, he just did this. Wow, what is that? How is that not a travel? How is that a travel? And rage baits the internet, and he probably made money off of that. Good for him, honestly. But I don't think that's valuable to anybody. But let's go through this example, okay? He said the future of basketball. This here. Again, blind reacting, right? So it depends what you're talking about. At this point, right, a lot of refs might call this the gather, and then that's a pivot, right? He's established a pivot because of by the fact of how long he spent on the ground. So he's gathered, and now that's 2 steps right there. You see what I'm saying? A lot of refs are going to call it that way, and that's honestly probably the classic, typical way to call this call, to interpret this as a ref. Because what you've seen now is you've made a gather step, and you're here, right? That's 1, 2. You got to shoot that. That step through is the 3rd step right there. That's because if you count that gather as the 1st step, right, you get 1, 2, or as the 0 step per se. You get 1, 2. So those 2 feet hitting the ground after that, that's not a typical jump stop. That is your 1, 2. You got to let the ball go. You're not establishing a pivot because that pivot was established when you gathered the ball and spent that long on the ground with your 1 foot on the ground. This is not one of the most egregious examples, and it's probably close to the line as to what would be called an appropriate jump stop. Like some refs might, if you had spent a little, jump stop, you're gathering as you're stopping, then you can establish a pivot. In this case, that's not what he did, right? I mean, he picked up his ball, he picked up the ball. And I mean, I just don't see that as not being a travel. This is one where it gets really dicey, right? These are the ones that he does where it's like crazy, all right? Theoretically, it depends on how you interpret the gather, but right here, boom, he's picked up his dribble. He's no longer able to dribble again, right? He has 2 hands on the ball. Clearly, the ball hand is underneath the ball. There is no dribbling that ball again. So he's now gathered it, and his foot is on the ground. Most refs and most basketball people in general are going to say he established a pivot here. It's not the fact that he gathered the ball. I mean, yes, he it's a gather, quote unquote, but he gathered it, and now he's spinning around on his foot. He's now established his pivot. So once you establish your pivot, that's your pivot. You just picked up your pivot foot. You now have to shoot or pass. You cannot take another step here. That's a travel. You see what I'm saying? So many basketball professionals are gonna say that that's a travel, and I would agree with them. I do think he has a point in certain instances, and I think in certain instances it's a travel. It is a travel. So let's talk about this one. Gather, okay? 1, 2. I mean, it's that I feel is legal, honestly. You're making it look funky, and you're probably gonna get called for a travel doing all this, but I think this is legal. This is actually, that's 2 feet. He might have just shuffled his feet a little bit, right? I'm curious as to what this guy has to say. Honestly, I should have listened to more of his commentary.
The craft. Like watching his stuff and really studying his stuff will give you a better understanding of footwork. Thanks for watching this. just leave him alone. He knows what he's doing. Like if you don't like it, don't. I mean, people are going to do it anyway. I'm not going to stop people from being ridiculous, but it's like, why waste energy talking about, like, yeah, again, it's funny. Like in my group chats, like we'll talk like, yeah, I wish somebody would do one of those moves against me in 21, you know, and try to argue that it's not a travel. You know, like it's funny. Like there are jokes that come from it naturally, and it's funny to talk about. But dude really is a student of the craft. Like watching his stuff and really studying his stuff will give you a better understanding of footwork. Thanks for watching this clip.
All right, so he said a whole lot of nothing. He's sitting on the fence. I don't see him making a point as to whether that's a travel or not. I would say, of course, that is a travel. Now let's watch this one as an example as well. Okay. Sorry, my dog is barking over there. My girl's over there with food, and he's trying to get the food, so he's barking. But anyway. Okay, so let's just break this down. I'm gonna watch this in its entirety. Okay. Now I actually, this guy makes me think a lot, and I like that because I'm gonna give that a like. And the reason I say that is because we got what he's doing, like, I actually don't know the rule here. Off the backboard, if it's is that a self-pass or a legitimate shot attempt? I don't know how the rule book looks at that, and if that resets his step count. I would think that this would not reset your step count. That seems to be a self-pass to me. That's what I would guess. I mean, I don't know how officials are going to look at that. A lot of officials are crooked, don't know what the fuck they're looking at anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I don't know how, like, this should be interpreted, is what I should say. Let's look at this. Okay, look. I would say that this is the 0 step right here. Okay? 1. Okay, that's your 0 step. That's your gather. You now have 2 steps. Okay? And clearly you're not in a pivot position right now. You are not operating off of 2 feet. You don't get the same luxuries as you do if you were operating off of 2 feet and pivoting. The step through, all that shit, back and forth on one leg, it doesn't operate. It doesn't operate like that anymore after this. 1, 2, okay, I would say this is legal so far, and I don't know. I'm honestly just blatantly gonna say I don't know. I'll have to look into this rule. I don't know if those additional 2 steps are considered a self-pass after this. It probably would depend on the ref. But yeah, that could potentially be a travel. So let's see. I found his actual channel now, so let's go off of that. My dog is right here. What's up, Brody? How you doing, man? Hello. What's up, buddy? All right, hold on. Okay, man. First of all, that's ups. I mean, for his size. Yeah, and shit. Look, man. Okay, I would have said he gathered on the last one. This here, I don't think there's a written rule on the amount of time you can spend on the ground on the step through, frankly. Again, I think depending on the ref, at some point they might say that you have now established a new pivot, which makes that a travel. It's not a step through if you're standing on your foot. You're not stepping through, right? You're pausing, but again, that may need to be delineated more clearly within the rule book. We might need to talk to Adam Silver, whoever it is that runs this shit, the head of officiating, and figure that out. 1, okay, there's your gather. I mean, I don't know, man. I think that's going to get called a travel 9 times out of 10. Would I call it a travel after really analyzing this? Shit. I'm giving him, look, if I'm being lenient here and trying to think about the way he's thinking, this is the gather, right? He's gathered it. He wouldn't have called it the gather up until then, but when he established that he could not dribble again, 2 hands on the basketball, I would say that was definitely the gather. His foot was on the ground. He now has 2 steps. He's looking at it as he's now gathered. This is his gather step right here, the jump stop. Is his gather step, affording him a new pivot, and then a step through, which is extra long. and probably going to get called just for that. So you're putting yourself in a spot. Obviously, you can't use this stuff in game. That's never been a debate. But I mean, you know, is it a walk? Is it actually a walk? You know, barbershop, all that. But like, is it a walk? This is a walk. I mean, I think there's nobody that would say this is not a walk. Okay. There's your gather right there. 1, 2, and that's a travel. That's the third step. He's not establishing a pivot, right? He's taking 2 steps independently. I see what he's saying. I mean, I do, but you know, and then there's the step through. Gather, okay. Gather, 0 step, okay, I agree with you so far. I mean, honestly, I've seen clips of Steph Curry with an uneven jump stop like this, a 1-2 or a slide stop. And, you know, there's plenty of players that use that stride stop where it kind of lands like this. It goes 1-2, and it's not simultaneous with your feet, but it's like this. So at that point, I do see what he's saying. Honestly, I do. Pivot, step through, on non-pivot. Totally see what he's saying. I'm not gonna lie. I wanna watch this again though, because this is honestly bending my mind a little bit, and I'm trying to wrap my head around this as a guy who has been coaching the game for a while. I think where we lose him, right, and where a lot of people do lose him, is right there. You're spending a lot of time on that, man. Like, this is the problem, right? This is where things get called into question. Because the fact that you're doing all this shit while you're on this gather step, quote unquote, most refs are going to call this a pivot established. And now you know what I'm saying? Like, that right there is a walk. Just off of that. And then all this is even extra. So, I don't know, honestly. Like, because look, then that's your step through. If they say that's your pivot foot off that gather because you spent so much time on that damn foot, now you have your step through. As soon as this foot touches, it's over. That's a walk. You see what I'm saying? This is how I feel most referees would interpret this. Just the same logic he uses on this step through on the non-pivot, it would actually be his orange shoe. Right? I'm just trying to think about this again. This is a blind react. I'm just pulling up random videos and trying to, boom, gather, pivot established at this point because you're doing all that. Step through, foot touches, travel. You travel because this was your non-pivot foot. You picked up your pivot foot, original pivot foot, which you're calling the gather, right? And you get a 0 step, yes, but you don't get to stand on your 0 step and call that a 0 step. That's not how that works. And again, I think this needs to be more clearly written in the rule book. It could be written better, frankly. So that's where I have a problem with that one. Let's look at one more before I call the video. The fuck am I looking at? Okay, let's just go back to his channel, right? It's probably the easiest way to do this. This is not a travel. Also not a travel. You see how this is different than what he's doing, though? Look, Bryce is dribbling the ball. Am I right? This dude's dribbling it, high pickup. This is his gather, okay? This is a true gather in a game in the way it's intended to be. That's your 0 step. They're not going to count that, right? It's not your 1 step because you are gathering while your foot's already on the ground. Now you get 2 steps. 1, 2, up. That's how a gather step is supposed to be interpreted. This, again, that's just 2 steps. I think he gathered it in the air, right? In this instance, this is right. He's taken off. I mean, shit, that looks weird. I'm not gonna lie. Up, I would say he's gathered it in the air. He's already in the air by the time he's gathered it. He can no longer dribble. He's already in the air. So there's no gather step at this point. 1, 2. The gather step is when you pick it up while your foot's on the ground and you gather it, right? You gather it. Your foot's on the ground. That's not going to be your first step. You get 2 more steps after that. That can be manipulated. James Harden with the step backs, whatever, la-di-da. This shit, this is OD though, bro. I'm not gonna lie. Like, this is way too far. I don't know about this one. Let me see this clip though. But a lot of what he's doing is not gonna be. That is gonna be a travel. I don't think that one. Let me look at that one again. That one looks alright. Not gonna lie. Let me see this. Probably my last one. Gather. I would say that he's gathered it in the air. He now has 2 steps to operate with. He doesn't get an extra step because he's gathered it in the air. 1, 2, boom. That's not a travel. That's fine. Let's play this audio one time just for the just to see. I don't like to mute people and counter nobody. Let me see if I can counter what he's saying or if I agree with him.
Hey, yo, y'all already know why I'm here. Now, this play by Bryce James reminded me of this exaggerated clip right here. And it reminded me of one of my concepts from a couple years back. And since the EYBL circuit pretty much plays under NCAA men's rules, let's break it down by those rules. According to one of my NCAA referee friends, most leagues would consider the dribble ending right here with both feet off the floor in game. He then takes step 1 on left, then step 2 on right to his finish, which would make this legal on NCAA men's, NBA, and FIBA levels. Bryce's play also reminded me of this concept that I created a few years back as well. This play is legal on NCAA men's because according to their new rule interpretation, it allows some gather step footwork on drives to the basket, spin moves, Euro steps, and step back moves. I also believe that in game it would not be called a travel on NCAA women's and majority of high school games either. And remember, there's no height limit on the step, and unorthodox does not mean illegal. I've been trying to tell play is legal on NCAA.
I agree. Unorthodox does not mean illegal. That is, unorthodox also does not mean wrong. That's something that I see frequently, so I'm glad he said that. I agree with that point entirely.
Legal on NCAA.
Now, that being said, let me look at what he did right here, because he said it reminded him of this concept. Let's see. That's a gather, okay? You've gathered the ball. You can no longer dribble once you've done that, okay? So this is your 0 step. See what you do after that. 1, 2, yeah. I mean, shit, that's legal. It looks legal to me. I don't, the thing is, it just depends how long he spends on the ground. Because, again, like he said, it doesn't say anything about, your 0 step has to be less than X milliseconds long. It doesn't say that, right? But I think most referees and almost everybody, really, in the basketball world would say that now you've established your pivot. Maybe they're not able to articulate it that way, but that is what a lot of people are saying. I think in this example, what he did here is fine. But that's just my thought on that. I think this is like pushing it, right? This is borderline right here. He did slow it down though, like slow motion. So maybe, because they could. I wouldn't call that establishing a pivot. That's a true gather. Anyway, that's my take on Milton Chavis. I think he makes some good points. I think sometimes he's bugging. He's spending too much time on the ground on that gather and calling it a gather, which makes the rest of the move moot. But overall, yeah, I mean, manipulating the rules is how the game adapts. It's always been the case. So that's my take on the subject, fellas. Peace.